Colonel James, Dutch, Anderson sat in his sparse apartment at midnight, staring at the blank computer screen. 25 years of military service, 3 tours in Afghanistan, a Purple Heart, and 2 Bronze Stars, and now he lived in government housing at Fort Ridgeway, forgotten by the country he'd bled for. The base was dying. Budget cuts had slashed personnel by 60%. The commissary operated 3 days a week. The medical facility was understaffed and under-equipped. Worst of all, veteran suicides had tripled in the past year. Just yesterday, Dutch had found Sergeant Martinez in the barracks, another good soldier who couldn't find a reason to keep fighting. His fingers trembled as he began typing. "Dear President Trump, my name is Colonel James Anderson, and I'm writing what might be my last letter. Fort Ridgeway is collapsing. Our veterans are dying. The system meant to protect those who protected America is broken beyond repair." He paused, thinking of Martinez's young daughter, who would grow up without her father. "Sir, I've never asked for anything in my career. But I'm begging you now, don't let us become another forgotten casualty of bureaucracy. These men and women deserve better than to fade away in silence." Dutch attached photos of the crumbling infrastructure, empty barracks, and the memorial wall where too many new names had been added recently. He hesitated before hitting send, knowing this desperate plea would likely disappear into the void of presidential correspondence. But Martinez deserved this final attempt. They all did. As he clicked send at 2:47 a.m., Dutch whispered a prayer he hadn't said since Afghanistan. "God, if you're listening, send help. These warriors can't hold the line much longer." 3 days passed with no response. Dutch continued his routine, morning formation with a dwindling number of soldiers, afternoon visits to the overwhelmed medical facility, evening walks past boarded-up buildings that once bustled with military activity. The base felt like a ghost town where the ghosts were still breathing. On Thursday morning, Dutch's phone rang. The caller ID showed a Washington, D.C. number he didn't recognize. "Colonel Anderson? This is Sarah Mitchell from the White House. President Trump received your letter and would like to visit Fort Ridgeway. Can you accommodate a presidential visit this Saturday?" Dutch nearly dropped his phone. "Ma'am, are you certain? This base isn't exactly presentable for a presidential visit." Sarah's voice was warm but determined. "Colonel, the president specifically said he wants to see the real conditions, not a cleaned-up version. Can you gather your personnel?" Word spread through the base like wildfire. For the first time in months, Dutch saw something he'd almost forgotten in his soldiers' eyes: hope. Even the most cynical veterans began to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone in Washington actually cared about their sacrifice. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the mood Fort Ridgeway had carried for months. But as the presidential motorcade pulled through the rusted gates, something electric charged the air. 200 veterans stood at attention in the main courtyard, every soul left on the base, dressed in their finest uniforms despite faded fabric and worn boots. When Trump emerged from his vehicle, Dutch stepped forward to salute. But the president surprised everyone by walking directly to the memorial wall, reading every name of the fallen soldiers. The silence was profound and respectful. Then Trump turned to face the assembled veterans, his expression serious and determined. "Gentlemen and ladies," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "I'm here because Colonel Anderson wrote me a letter that broke my heart. Today, that changes." Standing before the assembled veterans in the light drizzle, Trump looked each soldier in the eye as he spoke. "I've read every word of Colonel Anderson's letter. I've seen the photos of this base. What I'm seeing here is a disgrace to every uniform in this country." His voice rose with genuine anger. "But it's not your disgrace, it's ours in Washington." The veterans listened intently as Trump continued. "You served your country with honor. You earned our respect, our gratitude, and our commitment. Instead, You got budget cuts and broken promises. He gestured toward the crumbling buildings around them. This ends today. Colonel Anderson felt his throat tighten with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Trump pulled out his phone and, right there in the rain, began making calls. Hello, this is President Trump. I'm standing at Fort Ridgeway, and I need immediate emergency funding authorization for complete base renovation. Within 30 minutes, Trump had secured commitments for base infrastructure repair, increased medical staff, reopened commissary services, and most importantly, a comprehensive veteran mental health program. Colonel Anderson, Trump said, I'm putting you in charge of overseeing this transformation. You'll report directly to my office. But Trump wasn't finished. He walked to the memorial wall and placed his hand on the newest name, Sergeant Martinez. Every name on this wall represents a failure of leadership. We failed them in life, but we won't fail their memory. He turned back to the crowd. This base will become a model for veteran care nationwide. As the presidential motorcade prepared to leave, Trump made one final commitment that would echo through military history. 3 months from today, I'll return. When I do, Fort Ridgeway will be the finest veteran facility in America. The rain stopped as he spoke, and for the first time in years, sunlight broke through the clouds over the base. 3 months later, Colonel Anderson stood at the same spot where he greeted a dying base. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. New barracks gleamed in the morning sun, the commissary bustled with activities 7 days a week, and the medical facility had tripled its staff with specialized PTSD counselors. The sound that moved Dutch most was laughter, genuine, hearty laughter echoing from the recreation center that had been built where the old abandoned warehouse stood. Veterans who had been contemplating suicide were now mentoring younger soldiers, sharing their stories of recovery and hope. Colonel Anderson! Trump's voice called out as the presidential motorcade returned exactly as promised. Dutch saluted crisply, but this time his uniform was new, pressed, and worn with pride. Behind him stood not 200 forgotten veterans, but 500 active personnel who had requested transfers to what was now known as the Miracle Base. Mr. President, Dutch said, his voice strong and clear, Fort Ridgeway reports ready for inspection. Trump smiled broadly and began his tour of the transformed facility. Every building had been renovated or rebuilt. The memorial wall now stood in a beautiful garden where veterans could find peace and reflection. In the new mental health center, Dr. Sarah Chin, one of the country's top PTSD specialists, who had transferred specifically to serve at Fort Ridgeway, briefed Trump on their success rates. Mr. President, we've had 0 veteran suicides since the renovation began. Our treatment programs are being studied by facilities nationwide. As the day concluded, Trump addressed the assembled crowd once more. 3 months ago, Colonel Anderson wrote me a letter asking for help. Today, you've helped us redefine what America owes its veterans. He paused, looking at faces that now radiated purpose and dignity. You didn't just save this base, you've shown America how to honor its promises. Dutch watched the presidential motorcade leave, but this time with gratitude instead of desperation. That evening, he sat down at his computer again, but instead of writing a desperate plea, he began documenting the miracle of Fort Ridgeway, a story that would inspire veteran care reform across the nation. His letter had saved more than a base. It had restored faith in America's commitment to those who served.